Okay, it is August 15th, and I'm out here again at the Burfiend Farm with George Burfiend and his family, who have kindly agreed to... There's Colt, who got a bad case of poison ivy. You can probably see on his face. Sorry about that. The whole family's been very generous with their time here and information, and we're going to do it again today. And George was just about to tell me something about the lilac bush over here.
Yeah, where that lilac bush is, just beyond it and going down over the bank is the road that they used here on this farm to get down. And right where it comes out, I walked down it the other day. It's all full of trees falling down, but you can tell the road real plainly. And right beside it, where it went down, that's where the cabin was that Grandpa and his brother stayed in when they fished here before any of the houses were built up here. And also, I remember seeing the reels there that they wound their nets on.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, that was, we'll say 35 or something.
Yeah, your
like
earliest
that.
memory.
Yeah.
Around 1935?
Yeah, they were still there, yeah.
The reels and the shack, too?
Yeah,
the
it
cabin?
was just some, you know, boards and stuff kind of nailed up. It wasn't really what you could call a cabin anymore. It had just about deteriorated to nothing. But that's where it was, right where that road goes down and goes there. Because most all these farms have a road that they had to go down to the beach. You could drive a team of horses down there in a wagon. Yeah. And they picked up stuff on the beach. There was a lot of timbers and stuff like that come floating in of one kind or another. And the old barn had a tall ladder in it that you could get up into the haymow that, and I don't remember which one of the grandpas or great-grandpas ripped it down and put it over, and that was the two sides, and then they made rungs and built a ladder out of it.
They built the ladder out of what was it originally?
Something that, a tree.
Oh, that had been gathered up along the beach and brought up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you refer to that as a dugway, that route that you'd get up and down the bluff?
Well,
is that?
Yeah. Some of them talked about them always as being a dugway because as you will be able to see if you get over there, this side is and then it benches out so that they had to dig it to get it down there. I imagine they probably did it with a slip scraper and team or something like that.
Yeah. Was there any other particular term if you were talking around the farm and you were going to say you were going to go take that way down to the beach? Was there something that you called it particularly? Or
well, not really. They just tell us, take the team and wagon and go down to the beach. Yeah. And that's the only way you can get there from here.
Yeah. The tree line was always referred to as the grove.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I never heard that before either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the grove. If they referred to that, you knew right where to go. You weren't going back up here somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you call your woodlot a woodlot?
No,
that's from some other
because we put wood up from all over here as well as in the 40, and I'll show Tom the different places where we cut wood as we go back.
Okay. As far as that the shanty or whatever you want to call it that was down at the bottom of the road down to the beach there, was that so when you would get down to the base of the bluff along that dugway or whatever, was the little cabin, say, right there on the left or the right?
Right on the right as you went down, and it was just, you might say, right on the edge of the trees there. Okay. Because at the time when I first remember, the lake was low enough that you had more beach than you do now.
Yeah, Jack told me about that. There was a considerable amount of space down there at the bottom of the bluff.
Right, and that's where Grandpa and Uncle Louie were camped, you might say, to fish when they went out, and I think it was in August. I don't know that for sure, but I think it was in August, and they lifted their nets, and they'd had some damage to them. but not a great deal. And they would usually bring the nets back in and put them on those reels and do their patching. But this time they decided, well, there wasn't enough, and they just patched right there.
Oh.
Yeah, they were 18 and 20 years of age, according to that stuff Audrey put together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And anyway, they decided to patch the nets right there, and they were doing their sewing and stitching there, and didn't pay attention, and the squall blew up. And as you know how fast it can be on Lake Michigan, it's just no time, and they didn't have that big of a boat, and it flipped them over. And they started to drift, and they thought it was going to drift them around into Good Harbor Bay, and they'd be a long ways from shore. And they thought about staying with the boat, and then they decided they better leave.
Oh.
And Uncle Louis was a real good swimmer, and Grandpa could swim, but not too much. Well, the last thing Grandpa remembers is Uncle Louis was a long ways ahead of him, and he saw him, and he thought he was getting ashore. And it's just like he stood up and just dove over backwards, and they never saw him again.
Huh. And
then Grandpa swam, and he give out and said, well, that's it. And he laid his feet down, and they hit the bottom, and so he walked out.
Oh my gosh.
And that's how it was. Well, aside to the story, the next day the boat was still out there, right where it was. And what had happened is the nets had wrapped around the cross member in the boat, and the anchors fell to the bottom, and the boat was really anchored there, but the nets were so long they thought they were drifting.
Oh.
So if they had stayed just a little while longer,
yeah,
they could have rode it out on the boat, and then got in that way. Probably paddled the boat in some way or another.
Yeah.
So that's the way it goes.
So the boat was upside down?
Upside down.
But it didn't sink.
But it didn't sink.
What sort of boat was this, do you know?
Well, what my dad always said, it was a round bottom rowboat type, but what they call those? Tinker built or something. Anyway, it was a round bottom boat that would stand a fair amount of sea, but I think the reason it flipped them over is because they had so many nets in there and so much fish, and so they were setting down, and I suppose it just got to rocking them and tipped them over.
Now, you say they would go and stay down in this cabin for fishing, and this was when the family was living in the house up here?
No,
right here?
The family, because Dad used to talk about they'd go home every couple of weeks or so, and I guess some way get the fish there. Maybe Carsten came over with a team or something, but I think they were living in a log cabin back over there by Milton Bash's.
Yep, I've heard about that. There was one.
Yeah, that's where I think.
Well, is that the place we went?
Yeah, years ago.
So
yeah.
I'll be able to find a photograph of that for you, Tom.
That would be great. I've been looking for a photograph of that.
It was quite a shambles.
Yeah.
The kids poked their heads out the various holes, and it was our kids and Pete's kids.
But that's where they would go, every couple of weeks, and I suspect that well, I don't really know if the dock in Port Nida was there. If it was, they sold a lot of their salted fish right there to off the dock to boats that came by. So I don't know just how that worked, but
well, was that before these houses were here?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the thing. There were no houses here at all at that time.
No.
Okay.
And I don't know what the homestead law was. I know that Abraham Lincoln signed the deeds on this place, but in the write-ups at the park, as they say, Carsten bought that. Now, I don't know whether it was provision in the homestead law that permitted them to, or if they referred to him paying the fee for filing, I don't know what it was.
Yeah, because he was the first one in the whole area, so I don't know who he would have bought it from other than
That's
the
right.
government.
That's right. That's right, and that's what I don't really understand that part of it. I was going to mention that to Kim the other day, because you know we got that book, that study they made up in Ida, and they, I just thought first off it was totally wrong, but then
It's just the terminology.
just the terminology. I decided.
Yeah, maybe so. Just. And have you heard the story that there was supposedly some kind of I think it's supposed to have been a 2-story log cabin down on the beach that they had way back when? The first cabin that Carsten and his family lived in when they came here?
Well, the only thing I heard, the story I heard was that he waited over on South Manitou, I think it was, for this place to open up for homesteading, and then he came over here. He had this place picked out.
Yep.
Now, whether he had a cabin down on the beach,
I don't.
Yeah,
it's funny because that's a kind of a standard story you hear anytime people talk about the early history here. But then, you're the same as Jack. When you get to the actual Burfiend family descendants, they say we never heard that before. So, who knows?
And nobody would have put up much of a structure on the beach, for goodness sake. The ice. Now I know the lake is higher now than our days of yore, but my gosh, Tom, the ice that piled in here in the winter of 78, 79 when we lived here, that was 231 inches of snow that year.
Yeah.
That was official. That wasn't us. That
Right.
was some official something or other around here. But the ice was piled how high?
Oh, of course, I can remember that from forever, and there'd be gushers of water coming up.
Ground a building to shreds. Nobody would have put up. Well, they might have done it once, and then when it was destroyed, they'd have moved up here where it was safe.
But that house, that old house that was over there just beyond the lilacs, that's where great Grandpa Carsten, where it was when the Mormons came through and went to Beaverhead, or Beaver Island.
Beaver Island. Yeah.
Beaverhead's on the Gila National Forest.
Okay.
And they were kind of rough on the male population, but it was always said that they wouldn't harm the women folk. And
Oh,
kids.
is that right?
Yeah.
Huh.
And the Indians came and told Grandpa, great Grandpa, that they were coming, and they took him out and hid him out in the woods.
Oh.
And the Mormons came there and stayed around 2 or 3 days around the place. Now, they never did hurt Grandma or anything else, and of course they couldn't jump the claim because he was there, or his family was there. And so they finally moved on, and that's when they went to Beaver Island. And then, I don't know, what was it? They only stayed there, I think, like 5 years or something, and decided it was a bad deal. And they were coming back, and they shipwrecked right here on Pyramid Point. And Grandpa Pete and Grandpa Carsten pulled a lot of them out of the water.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. They did. But they blew in a storm, and they didn't get around the point. So
Right. Did they tell anything more specific about it, or was that kind of it that they helped pull some of them out?
They pulled them out, and quite a few of the people they put out here for several days till they could get a way out. And I don't really know for sure how that was. That they got out, whether another boat was coming along and came and got them, or just how it happened.
Okay, George and I are now up at the Big Bend in Baker Road. Right there is the Big Bend in the road, and we're following this old 2-track that goes up to the woods here and then up the valley. And George was saying that this used to be Art Bash's field right here that we're walking through. And what'd you say the line was up at
Just
the
up on the edge of the woods there.
edge of the woods there?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
My dad told me one time, oh, I must have been 5 or 6 years old, something like that, and my brother, which was a year younger than me, and he told us to take, we had a pail of milk and a roast of pork.
Mm.
And he said that we should take them up to Mary, and I can't remember what her sister's name was. They both lived there.
Was it Ellen?
Maybe. Ellen Miller lived.
Oh,
I don't know for sure. What I should have asked Jack what Mary's.
yeah. I've got it somewhere.
Probably. Well, anyway, Mary had quite a goiter.
Mm-hmm.
And we went up there and came up there with that, and oh, she was tickled. And of course, they just had nothing, you know. They'd take their cattle in the summertime and drive them from there clear down to Lake Michigan to drink every day.
Mm.
And in the wintertime, they melted snow, enough for, I don't know, 5 or 6 cows and their own self. They didn't have a well. They just melted the snow for their water use. But anyway, I took that stuff up there to her, and she said, oh my, I don't even have any cookies for you. And we told her, well, that was fine, and everything else, and she wanted to sit down. She said, sit down and warm up. Take your boots off, because it was snow. Well, we stayed around there for a little while, and every once in a while they'd come walking by, and when she did, she'd always come in and want to know where her boys were. And I suppose a lot of people played some nasty tricks on her.
Yeah.
But we enjoyed her. But they did. Well, I guess that was entertainment, was playing tricks on people. I was telling Jack about when they were thrashing after the end of the steam engine stuff, why one of the big old international tractors and the Anderson brothers, they were bachelors, brought the thrashing machine around. And they just didn't have really, it seemed like good energy, because they just didn't eat anything. And when it was thrashing time, they just took on groceries because everybody fed them wherever they were. And one stood like this, and he just like a post, you know.
Hmm.
He was standing there, and the thrashing machine was going along, and the old tractor was running. And Charlie Miller took the oil can that he had there and set it on the exhaust. And he fooled around it till it got warm enough that it was just the temperature of your skin. And Ernie was standing there like this, and he went around behind and he squirted that hand full of oil. And then he went on. And he told him, he said, hell, he said, he's the only man in the world that can sleep standing up. And Ernie stood there for quite a while, and pretty soon he started to go back like that, and then he felt that oil, and he looked at his hand, and it was dripping oil, and he went over and checked the tractor all over. Never did know where the oil come from.
Oh, no. Jeez. Huh?
Yep, so.
Did you ever hear them called the Honey and the Sweetie?
Oh, yeah, the Honey and the Sweetie, yeah.
Do you have any idea where that came from?
Well, I think it was just what people made up the names. They were two old bachelors living together, and so they decided that his mother, or their mother, lived there for a long time, and it might be that she called them Honey and Sweetie. And then everybody, of course, kept it going. Yep. Oh, yeah. One time a shaft about that long, and I'd say about 5/8 in diameter, broke on the thrashing machine when they were working here. And my dad said, oh, man. And, of course, you're always fighting weather and everything else when you're thrashing. And he said, we won't get thrashed for a week time, because they'd have to go to Traverse City, and they probably have to order it. And they said, oh, no, we'll be back tomorrow morning. And Dad said to me, now, how are they going to get back tomorrow? I said, they said they could weld it. And they took that thing home, because Dad said, well, it'll flop all over the place, it'll break again. And they welded that Hummer, and brought her back and stuck her in the next day, and she worked just as good. They forge welded it. It wasn't a torch steel, it was forge welding. And straight as this could be.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was.
You were saying in those days, as far as getting stuff fixed, there was
the Andersons that could were called blacksmiths, and Martin Bash was a blacksmith, and George Eckert was a little bit older than them, but he was a blacksmith. Seems like there was one more. Of course, my dad was, but he didn't practice the trade because it bothered his lungs. But there was anyway 3 that we could walk to from here to get something like that done.
Yeah, that was pretty handy.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Now there's the ridge cap, at least part of it. I think the rest of it's under that log, and the chimney. And you can see here and there some old parts of the frame. And in '78, when we were here, we came up here with Polly and John, my son and daughter, and the cabin was still standing. There was a cook stove. Would have set about here. Now, the way I remember, half of the floor was dirt, and the other half was lumber. The half over there that he had his bunk in, such. But it looks to me like that those 2 trees came down and dead centered that, and they've been down a while, and smashed her right to the ground.
And what was that stove like? Was it involve a brick arch, or was it an all steel iron?
It was an all steel cook stove.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, it was just a regular kitchen stove?
Regular kitchen stove, yeah.
And that's what he boiled all of his sap on?
No. Out here, see, there's the brick. Fire brick. And he had a big round cooker like that one in the shop down there, only this one was more temporary. And when he wasn't boiling sap, he tipped it over on the ground right there so that it wouldn't catch rain.
So his boiling apparatus actually set out in the weather?
Yes.
He didn't have that in the sugar shack?
No.
Oh, the sugar shack was just a place to stay.
Neat, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you had to hope it didn't rain when you were trying to boil.
Yeah.
So it was a big iron kettle that was sitting on the iron hearth, or the brick hearth?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And where we are here, let's see, there's a little side valley that goes up there. And here's the main valley, and we've come up quite a ways from that old Preston Wolf place. And you get up there about as far as the camera can see, maybe 300 feet or so, and there's a fairly major divide in the valley. The valley splits up left and right. And so we're just, it'd be right over here. And it's maybe a couple 100 feet up. And so we're just down from that, in kind of a big flat area. Here's showing over kind of to the west, and on down the valley toward the road, more or less to the south. Quite a wide valley in through this part. So you were saying when you were a kid that your sisters would sometimes stay up here with your grandfather when he was boiling, was it?
Yeah, yeah.
And then you thought you wanted to do that.
Yeah, and so he said, well, that was all right. I was pretty small for him to be messing with in the woods, but he thought that was a good deal. And so I stayed, and his story was that if he was here by himself, he ate out of the frying pan. If he had company, then you could eat out of the lid for the frying pan.
Fancy living.
Yep.
You're saying that your grandfather...
He was early on, when he wasn't fishing. In the wintertime, they couldn't fish.
Mm-hmm.
So in the summertime, in the wintertime, he worked in the logging woods. And he was a cabin or camp boy, because, I don't know, he was only 10 or 12 years old.
Hmm.
And in the morning, I don't know, 4 o'clock or so, like that, he'd have to go around and wake up all the loggers. They were in little cabins here and there around to get them to come in to eat.
Sounds like a dangerous job.
Yeah. And he had a voice that he could bore a hole in the brush when he yelled. And he'd open up their door and yell, "Cold draft! There's daylight in the swamp!"
Mm-hmm.
And there was this one guy would say that if Grandpa called him, he yelled at him too loud and scared him, and he'd bounce Grandpa around because he was a little kid. Then if he called him real gentle, he'd tell the boss, "Well, the boy didn't get me up. He didn't see till I got up."
Couldn't win.
So Grandpa told the Bull of the Woods, he said, told him what was going on. The Bull of the Woods said, "Okay, that's fine. Just tomorrow morning you come get me first." So Grandpa went over and got him, and he said, "Okay, now you throw the door up and walk in there and yell 'cold draft' just as loud as you can yell." And of course it was starting, and the guy jumped up, and the Bull of the Woods hauled off and hit the guy and knocked him right flat. He said, "After this, when the boy opens the door, you get up."
That took care of that,
That
huh?
took care of that right there.
And he was, did you say the boss was known as the Bull of the Woods?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
The foreman of those jobs was always called Bull of the Woods.